In 1872, a man named Walter Scott cut windows into a horse-drawn wagon, parked it outside a newspaper office in Providence, Rhode Island, and sold hot sandwiches to night shift printers who had nowhere else to eat. That wagon became the American diner. For 90 years, it fed the men who built this country, truck drivers, factory hands, railroad crews, and traveling salesmen, all for pocket change. Number 14 sold for a nickel when it first appeared and spawned a chain still running today. Number 3 was so common that every diner in America served it, and now almost no one under 50 has heard of it. And number 1 was not even a meal. It was a ritual. These 25 dishes fed working America. Then, fast food came, and we forgot they ever existed. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down. Number 25, Welsh rarebit. Long before nachos and loaded fries, the cheapest hot lunch on a diner counter was melted cheese poured over toast. Welsh rarebit was sharp cheddar melted slow with a splash of beer or milk, a spoonful of mustard, and a shake of Worcestershire, then ladled thick over 2 slices of toasted bread. The beer cooked off and left behind a tangy, savory sauce that clung to the toast and turned the bottom slice soft and rich. A plate cost about 15 cents in the 1930s, and it filled a working man's stomach without touching a piece of meat. Streetcar conductors and shop clerks ordered it on payday tight Mondays. Some diners cracked an egg on top and called it a golden buck. The dish came over with Welsh and English immigrants and settled into lunch counters from Boston to Pittsburgh. Today it survives only on a few old-school pub menus, and most Americans have never tasted it. It was cheese and toast elevated into a meal, and it deserved better than to be forgotten. Number 24, chipped beef on toast. Soldiers called it something we cannot say on this channel, but the polite name was creamed chipped beef, and for decades it was a diner breakfast that cost almost nothing. Thin sheets of dried, salted beef, sold cheap in little jars, were torn into ribbons and folded into a white gravy of butter, flour, and milk, then spooned hot over toast points. The beef seasoned the whole sauce, so the cook needed nothing but pepper. The toast drank up the gravy until it turned soft and creamy underneath. A plate ran about 20 cents and stuck to your ribs through a full morning of loading docks or pouring steel. Every veteran of 2 world wars had eaten it on a base, and they ordered it in civilian diners because it tasted like getting through. Counter cooks loved it because the beef kept forever and the gravy stretched a few cents of milk into a meal. Now, it lives only in military reunion stories. Number 23, city chicken. Here is a dish whose name was a lie everyone agreed to tell. City chicken contained no chicken at all. During the years when poultry cost more than pork, butchers in the industrial Midwest cubed cheap pork and veal scraps, skewered them on little wooden sticks to mimic a drumstick, breaded them and fried them golden. Diners served them up with mashed potatoes and gravy, and a working family in Pittsburgh or Cleveland could pretend they were eating chicken on a Tuesday. The breading turned crisp, the pork stayed juicy on the stick, and children thought it was the real thing. A skewer cost a fraction of an actual bird. The name came from city folk who could not keep a backyard flock the way farmers did, so the butcher built them a substitute. Polish and Slovak immigrant neighborhoods kept it alive for generations. As chicken got cheap and plentiful, the whole reason for the dish disappeared, and city chicken vanished with it. Number 22, American chop suey. It was not Chinese, and it was barely chop suey. American chop suey was elbow macaroni, browned ground beef, onions, green pepper, and a can of tomatoes, all simmered together in one pot until the noodles drank up the sauce. New England diners served it by the steaming bowlful for a quarter, and it fed mill workers across Massachusetts and Rhode Island for the better part of a century. In the Midwest, the same dish went by goulash, with no relation to the Hungarian original. The beef stretched across all that macaroni, the tomatoes gave it brightness, and a single batch on the back of the stove fed a counter full of hungry men through a lunch rush. It tasted better the next day, so cooks made it in vats. School cafeterias served it, church suppers served it. It was cheap, filling, and impossible to ruin. Today, jarred sauce and boxed dinners replaced it, and the one-pot version your grandmother knew has nearly disappeared. Number 21, Salisbury steak. When a diner wanted to sell you steak without the price of steak, it sold you Salisbury steak. Ground beef was mixed with breadcrumbs, onion, and egg, shaped into an oval patty, browned hard, and then smothered in a brown onion gravy that hid every humble thing about it. Served over mashed potatoes with a scoop of peas, it looked like a proper dinner and cost the diner pennies. The dish was named for Dr. James Salisbury, a Civil War physician who pushed chopped beef as health food, and by the 1950s it anchored the dinner menu of nearly every roadside counter in America. The gravy did the heavy lifting, turning cheap mince into something that felt like a Sunday meal on a Wednesday night. Traveling salesmen ate it across 1,000 miles of two-lane highway. Then the television dinner stole the name, froze it solid, and ruined its reputation. The fresh diner version, hot off the griddle, was a different animal entirely. Number 20, liver and onions. This is the one that makes people shudder now, but for decades it was a diner staple ordered by the toughest men in town. Beef liver was one of the cheapest cuts at the butcher, often under 20 cents a pound, and it was loaded with iron and protein that hard labor demanded. The counter cooks sliced it thin, dredged it in seasoned flour, and seared it fast in bacon grease while a mountain of onions caramelized, sweet and soft, in the next pan. The trick was speed. 2 minutes aside, no more, or it turned to shoe leather, which is exactly why a whole generation grew up hating it. Done right, it was mild, rich, and tender, the onions piled on top, the whole plate sitting in pan drippings. Railroad men and miners ate it for the strength it gave them. The nutrition never went anywhere. The cooking knowledge did, and so liver and onions slipped off the menu. Number 19, the Denver sandwich. Also called the Western, this was the sandwich a short order cook could make in 90 seconds flat. Beaten eggs were poured onto the griddle with diced ham, onion, and green pepper, folded into a thick omelet, and slid between 2 slices of bread. Legend says it was born on the wagon trains and railroads, where cooks used strong onions and peppers to mask eggs that were past their prime. By the diner era, it was an honest meal, cheap and fast, and portable enough to eat with one hand. Truckers ordered it to go, holding it in a napkin as they climbed back into the cab. A Denver cost about a quarter and packed enough protein to carry a man through a long haul. The same combination, served on a plate without the bread, became the Western omelet still found on breakfast menus. But the sandwich, the original road food version, has almost entirely faded out. Number 18, the breaded pork tenderloin sandwich. In the Corn Belt, this sandwich was a religion. A thin slice of pork loin was pounded flat with a mallet until it was the size of a dinner plate, breaded and deep fried until it hung 4 inches past the edges of the bun in every direction. The bun was almost a formality. Cooks dressed it with mustard, pickle, and onion, and a hungry farmhand could make a whole lunch out of it for under 50 cents. It was born in Indiana around 1908 and spread across Iowa, Illinois, and Ohio, where every small-town diner had its own version and customers argued over whose was biggest. The pork stayed juicy under that shattering golden crust, and the sheer size of it made you feel like you got a deal. Outside the Midwest, almost no one knows it exists. It is the regional king that fast food never managed to copy, and it is slowly disappearing as the old diners close. Here is where the story of the diner gets interesting. That wagon Walter Scott built was the start of an industry. By the 1920s, companies in New Jersey were manufacturing diners like railroad cars, shipping them whole down the highway and dropping them on roadside lots overnight. They were narrow on purpose, built to fit on a flatbed, which is why the counter and the row of stools became the heart of the place. Number 17, the patty melt. Somewhere between a burger and a grilled cheese sat the patty melt, and it was better than both. A thin beef patty was griddled with onions cooked down to brown sweetness, then layered with Swiss cheese between two slices of rye bread and grilled in butter until the outside crackled and the cheese ran. It was messy, rich, and impossibly satisfying for the dime or two it cost. The rye gave it a tang that a regular burger never had, and the buttered grill gave it a crust you could hear. It was the kind of thing a diner cook invented to use up bread, cheese, and a bit of beef all at once. For decades, it was the move-up order, the thing you got when you had an extra nickel beyond a plain hamburger. It still turns up on a few classic menus, but most younger Americans have never had one, and that is a genuine loss, because the patty melt was a small piece of griddle genius. A man with a little money could buy one, learn to work a griddle, and run his own business. Greek immigrants, in particular, bought thousands of them and built family fortunes one cheap plate at a time. The diner sold something the home kitchen could not. It sold a hot meal cooked by someone else at a price a laborer could afford, served fast, 24 hours a day. It fed the night shift, the lonely, the traveling, and the broke. It was the original fast food, decades before anyone called it that. Number 16, corned beef hash and eggs. When the cook had leftover corned beef from yesterday's special, none of it went to waste. He chopped it with boiled potatoes and onion, pressed the mixture flat on a hot, greased griddle, and let it sit until the bottom formed a dark, crackling crust before flipping it. 2 eggs went on top, yolks running gold into the salty, crispy hash. For a dime or 15 cents, it was one of the most satisfying breakfasts a working man could buy, and it carried him clear through to lunch. The whole dish existed because nothing in a tight kitchen could be thrown away. Yesterday's dinner became this morning's breakfast, and the customer never knew or cared. Hash done right, with that hard, seared crust, is a different food entirely from the soft gray stuff that comes out of a can. Most people today have only ever had the can, which is exactly why they think they do not like hash. Number 15, the tuna melt. Before tuna became diet food, it was diner comfort food. The cook scooped tuna salad onto bread, laid tomato and a slice of American cheese on top, and grilled the whole thing in butter until the cheese melted into the warm tuna and the bread turned golden. The contrast of cool, creamy filling going warm against crisp, grilled bread made it feel like more than the sum of its cheap parts. A can of tuna stretched across several sandwiches, so the diner made good money on it, and the customer got a hot meal for a quarter. It was the natural answer for Catholic customers on a Friday, and for anyone who wanted something other than red meat. The tuna melt is one of the few items on this list that still survives, but it is fading, crowded out by wraps and bowls and 100 trendier lunches. The grilled, buttery, cheese-bound original is quietly becoming a memory. Here is something the food industry would rather you not think about too hard. Every meal on this list disappeared for the same reason. They were cheap because the diner made them from scratch out of humble parts, and that meant the diner kept the profit. There was no corporation in between. When the fast food chains came in the 1950s and 1960s, they did not sell better food. They sold consistency, speed, and a brand you could trust in a town you had never been to. They spent millions teaching Americans that a burger should taste exactly the same in Ohio as in Arizona, and that sameness felt like safety on the new interstate highways. The independent diner could not compete with a national advertising budget. The hot turkey sandwich made fresh that morning lost to the burger made by a teenager from a frozen patty. We did not trade up. We traded the cook for the corporation, and we called it progress. Number 14, the loose meat sandwich. It looks like a sloppy Joe with no sauce, and it built an empire. Seasoned ground beef was cooked loose, never pressed into a patty, then piled with a slotted spoon onto a soft bun with mustard, pickle, and onion. Because the meat stayed crumbled, every bite fell apart, and you ate the last of it with a spoon. A man named Fred Angel started selling them in Muscatine, Iowa, in 1926 for a nickel, called his place Made Right, and the chain is still running in the Midwest today. Across Iowa, it also went by the tavern sandwich, and small towns guarded their local versions fiercely. The genius was simple. Loose meat cooked faster and stretched further than a formed patty, so the diner could sell it cheap and still make money. It was working food, plain and honest, and outside a handful of Midwestern states, almost nobody has ever heard of it. Number 13, the coney dog. The hot dog is not forgotten, but the diner coney is. A steamed, natural casing Frankfurter went into a steamed bun, then got buried under a fine beanless meat chili, a stripe of yellow mustard, and a heap of raw diced onion. It was invented not in Coney Island, but by Greek and Macedonian immigrants in Michigan, who opened Coney Island diners across Detroit and Flint that ran around the clock for the auto workers. A coney cost a dime, and two of them made a full meal on a 15-minute break. The chili was a closely guarded recipe, simmered for hours, spiced fine so it clung to the dog instead of sliding off. Whole rivalries were built on whose coney was best. Auto workers ate them by the millions on the way home from the night shift. The plain ballpark hot dog survived, but the slow-cooked, chili-smothered diner coney is a regional treasure most of the country never met. Number 12, hamburger steak smothered in onions. Before the hamburger went into a bun and got handed through a window, it sat on a plate like a grown-up meal. Hamburger steak was a thick beef patty, griddled hard, then buried under a pile of onions cooked slow and dark and sweet, with the pan dripping spooned over the top. It came with mashed or fried potatoes and whatever vegetable the cook had going, and it cost a fraction of a real steak. Working men who wanted meat and could not afford a sirloin ordered this, and the onions made cheap beef taste like a treat. It was the honest ancestor of the fast food burger, eaten with a knife and fork, no bun in sight. The whole point was to make a few ounces of ground beef feel like a proper dinner, and the onions did that job beautifully. As the drive-through burger took over, the dignified plated version slipped quietly off the dinner menu. Number 11, chicken a la king on toast. This was the diner's idea of fancy, and it cost almost nothing to make. Diced, cooked chicken, mushrooms, and pimento were folded into a rich cream sauce and ladled over toast points or a split biscuit. It used up every scrap of yesterday's chicken. The sauce stretched a little meat across a full plate. and it arrived looking elegant enough to feel like a splurge. A version supposedly born in a grand hotel trickled all the way down to the humblest lunch counter, where it became the order you placed when you wanted to feel a little spoiled on a tight budget. Secretaries and shop girls ordered it on a good day. The cream sauce, the soft toast, the little flecks of red pepper made it feel special for a quarter. Frozen and canned versions later turned it into a punchline, but the fresh diner original was genuinely comforting, and it has all but vanished from American plates. Number 10. The liverwurst sandwich. In a working-class diner, the cold sandwich board was full of organ meats nobody blinks at today, and liverwurst was king of them. Soft, spreadable liver sausage was sliced thick onto rye with mustard, raw onion, and sometimes a slice of tomato. It was protein-dense, deeply savory, and cheaper than almost any other meat at the counter. German immigrants brought it, and it became a standard brown bag and lunch counter staple for men who needed calories that lasted. Its cousin, olive loaf, the bologna studded with pimento stuffed olives, sat right beside it. These sandwiches fed factory shifts and warehouse crews for decades because they were filling, portable, and nearly free. American tastes turned away from organ meat in the second half of the century, and liverwurst went from everyday lunch to forgotten oddity. A whole category of cheap, nourishing food simply fell out of fashion, and the diners that sold it closed one by one. Number 9. Cube steak. Cube steak was the butcher's trick for selling a tough, cheap cut as something tender. A piece of round steak was run through a mechanical tenderizer that left it covered in little square dimples, which broke down the muscle and gave the cut its name. The diner cook dredged it in flour and pan, fried it quickly, then poured a brown gravy over the top, often serving it open-faced over bread or beside mashed potatoes. It was the everyday steak for people who could not afford steak, and it showed up on dinner specials all over the country. Country fried steak, that southern icon, is cube steak breaded and smothered in cream gravy, the same humble cut dressed up. The whole purpose was to make a few cents worth of tough beef eat like something better, and the gravy sealed the deal. As beef prices and tastes shifted, the plain cube steak special faded into memory. Number 8. Frankfurters and baked beans. Up and down New England, the cheapest hot plate at the counter was a couple of Frankfurters split open on the griddle, served over a mound of baked beans, slow-cooked with molasses and salt pork until they were sweet, dark, and thick. It was a Saturday night tradition that immigrant families brought into the diners, paired with a slab of brown bread when the cook had it. The beans cost pennies, the Franks stretched a little meat a long way, and the molasses made it taste like a treat instead of survival food. A full plate ran 15 or 20 cents and kept a longshoreman fueled through a brutal shift. The whole thing could sit on the back of the stove all day, getting better by the hour, ready whenever a hungry man walked in. The frozen and canned versions that replaced it taste like a faint echo. The real, slow-baked plate is nearly gone. Number 7. Spanish rice. Long before salsa outsold ketchup, the diner version of Spanish rice was a cheap, filling weeknight plate. Rice was cooked with tomatoes, onion, green pepper, and a little chili powder until it turned soft, red, and savory, sometimes with a bit of ground beef or bacon stirred through to make it a full meal. It had little to do with Spain or Mexico. It was American diner cooking, borrowing a few spices to make a sack of rice, and a can of tomatoes go a long way. A plate cost a dime, and the dish stretched almost endlessly, which is why it turned up in diners, school cafeterias, and church basements across the country. The tomatoes gave it color, the pepper gave it a gentle kick, and the rice filled you up for next to nothing. It was the kind of resourceful one-pan cooking that defined the era, and it has quietly disappeared from the American table. Number 6. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. This pairing is so woven into American memory that we forget it was once the cheapest hot lunch a diner could sell. 2 slices of bread, a couple of slices of orange American cheese, and a hot buttered griddle made a sandwich for a nickel, and a bowl of tomato soup made from a can, and a little milk turned it into a meal. The cheese came from government surplus and commercial blocks. The soup came concentrated, and the cook could turn out 100 a day without breaking a sweat. School children ate it, factory workers ate it, anybody short on cash ate it. The magic was in the dunk, the crisp, buttery sandwich going soft in the warm soup. It was comfort, built entirely from the cheapest shelf in the store. We still eat it, but we have forgotten that it began as poverty food. The meal you made when there was nothing else, and a little melted cheese could make the day feel survivable. Here is what the chain restaurants could never put on a flatbed and ship across the country. The counter itself. The diner was a narrow room where strangers sat shoulder to shoulder on a row of stools and watched one cook work the griddle a few feet away. The night shift nurse, the cop, the trucker, the drunk sobering up over coffee, the kid on his first day at the mill, all of them ate the same food at the same counter at 3 a.m. The cook knew the regulars by their orders. The waitress called everybody honey and meant it. For a person eating alone in a hard town, the diner was the one place where being alone did not feel like being invisible. You could sit at that counter, order the cheapest thing on the board, and still belong somewhere for 20 minutes. No drive-through ever sold that. No app ever will. Number 5. The hot fudge sundae. The diner soda fountain was its own small kingdom, and the hot fudge sundae was the crown jewel. Vanilla ice cream went into a tulip glass, and hot fudge thick enough to coat a spoon was poured over until it set against the cold. Then came whipped cream, a scatter of chopped nuts, and a single bright cherry on top. For a nickel or a dime, it was the reward at the end of a hard week. The thing a man bought his kid on a Friday, or a young couple shared on a first date at the counter. The fountain man was a craftsman who knew exactly how hot the fudge could be without melting the whole thing. Egg creams, phosphates, and malteds came off that same fountain. When the soda fountain died, all of it went together. The packaged versions in the freezer aisle cannot touch a sundae built by hand over a marble counter while you watched. Number 4. Pie la mode. 2 words of fake French that simply meant pie with ice cream, and it was the single most ordered dessert in American diner history. A wedge of pie, apple, cherry, or banana cream was warmed and topped with a scoop of vanilla that began to melt the moment it hit the crust. The phrase was supposedly coined at a hotel in upstate New York in the 1890s and spread to every counter in the land. Diners were famous for their pie, often baked fresh that morning and displayed in a glass case that spun under a light to tempt you the second you walked in. A slice cost a dime, a la mode maybe 15 cents, and it was the perfect end to a cheap meal, the small luxury anyone could afford. The spinning pie case was once the heart of every diner. Now it is a relic, and freshly baked counter pie has become something you have to hunt for. Number 3. The open-faced hot turkey sandwich. Here is the one almost every diner in America served, and almost no one under 50 remembers. Slices of roast turkey were laid over a single piece of white bread. The whole plate buried under hot gravy, with a scoop of mashed potatoes beside it, getting its own ladle of gravy on top. You ate it with a knife and fork because there was no picking it up. It was the diner's answer to Thanksgiving on a Tuesday in March, and it cost $0.25. The same dish came as hot beef, hot pork, or hot meatloaf, depending on what the cook had roasting. It used up the meat from the dinner special, the gravy stretched it across a full plate, and a hungry working man left satisfied for almost nothing. This was the meal that said the diner could give you a holiday dinner any day of the year. The fast food burger erased it, and a whole generation has never tasted it. Number 2, the Meatloaf Blue Plate Special. The Blue Plate Special was the deal of the day, named for the cheap divided plates with a blue pattern that diners served it on. And more often than not, the special was meatloaf. Ground beef stretched with breadcrumbs, onion, and egg, baked in a loaf, sliced thick, and laid beside mashed potatoes and a vegetable, the whole plate run under gravy or a tomato glaze. It cost less than 50 cents, and it was the closest thing to a home-cooked dinner a man living in a boarding house ever got. The leftover slices were fried for breakfast or slapped between bread for a sandwich, so nothing was wasted. The Blue Plate Special was a promise. It said that no matter how little you had in your pocket, you could sit down to a full, honest, 3-part dinner cooked by somebody who knew what they were doing. That promise is what fast food replaced with a paper bag. Number 1, coffee and pie at the counter. At the top of this list is something that was never really a meal at all. It was a ritual. A bottomless cup of coffee, refilled by a waitress who never let it run dry. A slice of pie from the spinning case, eaten on a stool at the counter while the world went by outside the window. For a dime, a man could sit there as long as he liked. The trucker stopping at 3 in the morning, the worker killing time before a shift, the old-timer who had nowhere else to go, the lonely person who just needed to hear another human voice. They all came for the coffee and the pie and the simple fact of being somewhere warm where somebody knew their name. That cup of coffee was cheap on purpose. It was the price of admission to belong somewhere for a while. Every diner in America ran on it. When fast food made eating something you did in your car alone, that is the thing we lost. Not just the food. The counter, the refill, and the feeling of being taken care of by a stranger who poured your coffee and called you honey. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. The hot turkey sandwich with gravy, the patty melt, the city chicken your grandfather might have eaten. Then go find an old diner, sit at the counter, order the coffee, and let them refill it. Because these were never just cheap meals. They were the places where working America fed itself and looked after its own, one blue plate at a time. Drop the one you are going to try in the comments. I want to know if the breaded tenderloin gets more love than the coney dog, and whether anyone out there still remembers a diner where the cook knew your order before you sat down.